All right, short video here. Just wanted to talk a little bit about slam changes because I'm sure that people are curious. So slam is actually based on height now. So if you jump up like this and then slam, you can actually see that this radius is about the same as it was before. So the Coda Meyer has a 8-meter slam radius, but it also scales with height now. So if you're like even right next to them and you just do this, you won't even hit this bombard directly in front of you. So the minimum radius is like basically the range of a normal melee attack. You have to be almost directly on top of them for the slam to hit, which makes sense, of course, right? This is true for most melee weapons. It's also true for Magistar, so let me just show that real quick. All right, so this is Magistar Incarnon with its evolution that increases slam range. And what you'll see is that, like, if we're doing the full jump up, this radius is still about what it was before, where it's gigantic. Whereas if you're just doing the instant slam, so just jumping and then immediately pressing slam like this, radius is much smaller. It's still larger than you'll see on like the Coda Meyer, for example, but still very much smaller. So Magistar is certainly nerfed. It turns out it takes a lot longer to jump up into the air instead of just doing like this type of thing, right? Nerfed in terms of DPS, nerfed in terms of range, especially in smaller tile sets. So like if you were in an area where you can't do the full bullet jump up, your range is just straight up going to be nerfed. Let's talk about the winners of the slam nerf. Obviously, the most important one to me is Sampotes. I kind of predicted that this weapon wouldn't really get nerfed that bad, and you can kind of see that that is actually the case here. Sampotes, its explosions are unchanged. So the initial slam radius is still the same. So like if I slam with this guy behind me, you can see that this is not hitting him, even when I'm really close, which it used to. But the explosion radius is still the same no matter how high you jump. So even if I'm slamming from right here, you can see that these clouds, these slam particles are still the same exact size that they used to be. They still proc status the same. They otherwise seem unchanged as far as I can tell. So still a very good weapon. Highly would recommend Sampotes these days. What I would say is that if you're doing a Sampotes build, what I would recommend is actually switching to more status than you used to run. This is what I would use mostly for tank kills and stuff. What I'm probably going to do for Sampotes specifically is I'm just going to switch to this, and then I'll probably roll this ribbon a bit more, just to see if I can get a plus status chance one. So just so that we can get melee afflictions to proc more often with the clouds. Because before we had the initial hit from the slam, and then we had the actual explosions. And both of those would proc afflictions pretty consistently, but now basically the initial hit will never be hit. So this is strictly just the waves if you're using it the way that you used to. Again, like you can still use this kind of the same way that you would use a normal slam weapon now, and this still works, but you just don't need to because the clouds are going to stay the same even if you're slamming like this, right? Another interesting one is actually the Ruvox. I kind of talked about how this weapon works in my Lavos video, but just to explain again, it does have this impale effect. So when you do a heavy slam, it'll make these spikes that will just give things flat status chance. And it turns out the radius of that slam effect is actually unchanged with the patch, but the damage is changed. So if you slam, let me just get up to combo real quick. All right, so we have our incarnon now. What you can see is that actually if I slam and I just do the instant slam, so this would not hit on the normal slam radius, we'll get the spike, but it won't do any damage. So you can now kind of like prime spikes like this without it ever really damaging the enemy at all, which is kind of useful for like testing and stuff, but it's not that great in terms of actual gameplay. I have not tested to see if this still makes things do status. My assumption is that it would, but it is not something that I've immediately tested, so we would just have to do this basically until we see a status proc. But still kind of the same weapon. It's just a CC tool now instead of an actual damage weapon. So similar to the Sampotes, the Tenet Exec is almost unchanged. We do lose the initial slam radius, but again, the projectiles seem to be unchanged. I think at this point it would be a good assumption to make that if a weapon had a special effect on slam, it's unchanged other than if like it happened after the slam it did damage. So the Coda Meyer will not have the same range that it used to, but it'll still do the toxin proc. This weapon will not have the initial range that it does, but it does still spawn the projectiles, which have the same range that they used to, and so on. So if you're doing a slam build, I would say Exec or Sampotes are probably your best two options. And then other than that, like most other weapons are kind of affected by the slam nerf pretty heavily. Same thing with Arca Titron. So here is that. If you haven't used this weapon specifically before, the way it works is that it has slam attacks that auto-apply electric. And then that electric effect will also count towards kills. And so previously it was very strong because what you could do is you could just slam, get that electric proc and proc influence. And then that would kind of be your range outside of like the already increased range that you get from the stacks. But now it is the actual range on the slams are pretty nerfed. You can see that it reached these guys, but it does like the range is noticeably nerfed for most cases. That said, this weapon still is an influence weapon, so like once you get influence actually procced, the range is unnoticeable. You can kind of, as long as you hit something with it, the 18 meter slam radius or the 18 meter influence radius will still work the same way as it used to. So I would kind of argue that Titron is less touched than Magistar ever was. Like this is still going to be a very good weapon, if not quite as strong as it used to be with its instant influence electric procs, and so on. Thank you, Master Iron Stash, for the 34 Forma bundle gift. That is literally over 100 Forma. I think I'm good on Forma now, guys. Thank you so much, though. I don't know what to do with all this Forma. I do plan on doing a lot of testing over the next few weeks. Though, to be honest, mostly this week. I actually took work off today just so I could test some stuff. So I'm in the process of doing that. If I run into anything particularly funny with Arexia or Valkyr after her rework, I will go over it. But for the most part, you can kind of guess what I'm going to be doing for builds. Valkyr, mostly going to be using her as an influence stick. I will actually kind of just show that real quick right now. This is the current build that I'm testing with her. So if people are curious about what I'm currently thinking about running, it's probably something like this. I did do a Netracell with this build and it seemed fine. I wasn't struggling with energy really at all. I definitely wasn't struggling with life. I never even got close to dying during this. I literally stood still and died on purpose once while I was testing this just to make sure that I was physically capable of dying. And that did work, but just some sort of influence stick like this, probably. So if I do any Valkyr coverage, probably what I'll be going over is just a Riven with a weapon that I think is particularly good with Valkyr. I haven't really decided on what it is yet, so if people have suggestions, I will look at those. Beyond that, same idea with Wrathful. You can basically do the same build. I haven't even tried this yet, and then a vanilla build, which I'll probably do some sort of range. And frankly, not even this. This will be the build. It'll be max range for Ripline, and then it'll be, I don't know, some other nonsense. So if people are interested in specific things for Valkyr or have good ideas for them, just let me know and I will try to test them as they come. But I think that's about it. So thank you guys for watching. I will see you guys, I don't know, maybe very soon. We'll see how this goes.